You will leave this campus immediately. I don't care whose daughter you are. His voice sliced through the auditorium like a blade. Oak Ridge is a place for excellence, discipline, and tradition. Not for, he paused, eyes narrowing, attitudes like yours. Principal Richard Whitman didn't yell. He didn't need to. His words, sharp and deliberate, fell over the room with crushing authority. Naomi Carter stood motionless near the stage, her back straight, her face unreadable. Students were whispering, teachers looking away. No one intervened. No one ever did. This school, he continued, stepping forward with theatrical precision, has upheld standards for over 60 years. You may be a smart girl, Naomi, but intellect without respect is worthless. You disrespected a teacher, walked out of class, and then refused to apologize. That kind of behavior, he turned to face the watching crowd, is unbecoming. It doesn't reflect the values of Oak Ridge. I didn't walk out, Naomi said, quietly but clearly. I was excused. Ms. Harrow, I'm not interested in excuses. He cut her off instantly. You undermined authority. You acted entitled. And frankly, I'm not surprised. He let those last words hang in the air, heavy with implication. A few students near the front looked down at their feet. They knew what he meant. So did Naomi. There's no space here for those who think the rules don't apply to them. You should be thankful we allowed you to stay as long as you did. The silence in the room grew unbearable. Naomi's fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack, but she didn't move. Her breathing was calm. Not a single tear. That seemed to irritate him more. Security will escort you out, Richard added, turning to gesture toward the doors. You may collect your personal items later. Consider your enrollment terminated effective immediately. One teacher, a young woman from the science department, shifted uncomfortably. She opened her mouth, as if to speak, but then closed it again. Naomi didn't look at her. She didn't look at anyone. Mr. Whitman, she said, not moving from her spot. You didn't even ask what happened. I don't need to, he snapped. I know your type. Always playing the victim. Always twisting the facts. Always trying to climb over others without earning your place. His voice was colder now, almost rehearsed. Oak Ridge doesn't bend for drama. No, Naomi said softly. It just bends for donors. A few students gasped. Richard's eyes flashed. Out, he growled.
Now.
A security guard entered through the side door. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. Naomi turned and walked out, head held high, through a hallway lined with stairs, some curious, some ashamed. Not one person reached out. Not one voice called her name. By the time she stepped outside, the cold Georgia air met her skin like ice. And still, she didn't cry. She had known this moment might come. What she hadn't known was how quiet it would be. How ordinary cruelty could look when dressed in blazers and marble floors. Naomi Carter, 16, honor student, daughter of a man the world knew but this school chose to forget, had just been erased. But not for long. Malcolm Carter read the email 3 times before leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. The subject line was simple. Naomi expulsion. The body of the message, however, was a masterpiece in arrogance. Cold, dismissive, devoid of nuance. Due to repeated violations of behavioral standards, your daughter has been permanently removed from the Oak Ridge Private Academy. We trust you will understand our decision to protect the integrity of our institution. No phone call. No request for a meeting. No right of reply. Just a digital stamp of exile. He closed the laptop slowly. For years, Malcolm had chosen to remain in the shadows of Naomi's academic life. He'd built entire universities from the ground up, funded public education reforms, sat on national councils, and yet, when it came to his daughter, he allowed her to walk a quieter path. She'd asked for that. She'd begged not to be Malcolm Carter's daughter at school. He respected it. Until now. When Naomi came home that evening, she didn't speak at first. She dropped her bag near the door, kicked off her shoes like it was just another Tuesday. Malcolm was already in the kitchen, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. Tea or cocoa? He asked gently.
Cocoa, she said.
Her voice was level, but her eyes were distant. He handed her the mug and waited. It took 7 minutes for her to say it. They kicked me out. He didn't flinch. Tell me.
She did.
Every detail. The accusation. The assembly. The way Whitman smiled when he said, "Your type." The way no one said a word. She didn't cry, but at one point her hand shook. He noticed, but didn't mention it. When she was finished, she looked up. "I know I said I didn't want help. And I meant that. But this, he said quietly, was never about help. It's about truth." That night, while Naomi slept upstairs, Malcolm didn't. He made 4 phone calls. 1 to his legal counsel. 1 to a private education equity firm. 1 to a state-level oversight contact. And the final one to someone who owed him a favor, a large one. By sunrise, he had a preliminary report. Oak Ridge was bleeding money. Enrollments had dropped since the pandemic. Deferred maintenance was piling up. Loans were being quietly refinanced under increasingly desperate terms. The school's reputation was its only remaining currency. And reputation, as Malcolm well knew, was a fragile thing. A well-placed offer, just aggressive enough to be taken seriously, was made that very morning. An emergency meeting was called by the Oak Ridge board that afternoon. And within 48 hours, ownership shifted. Discreetly. Legally. Irrevocably. At 7:15 a.m. on Monday, a faculty-wide meeting was scheduled. Mandatory attendance, the email said. Richard Whitman arrived in his usual Navy suit, holding a stack of papers he assumed would be needed to outline budget cuts. He didn't notice the quiet tension in the room until he stepped to the podium and saw who was already seated at the front row, Malcolm Carter.
Calm. Composed.
Silent. Richard's smile faltered. What brings you here?" he asked. "Ownership," Malcolm replied evenly. "As of this morning, Oak Ridge Private Academy is under new management." The room fell still. A woman in HR dropped her pen. Richard blinked, visibly confused. "This is absurd. You can't just—" "I can," Malcolm said, rising slowly. "And I did. Effective immediately, the former board is dissolved. A temporary oversight committee will begin reviewing internal practices. And your services, Mr. Whitman, are no longer required." "You don't have that authority," Richard hissed. "Actually," Malcolm said, pulling a document from a leather folder, "I do." He handed it to the stunned vice principal, who scanned it quickly, then nodded. Security was already at the door. "This is retaliation," Richard snapped. "You're doing this because of your daughter." "No," Malcolm said, calm as ever. "I'm doing this because of what you did to my daughter and to others." At that moment, the doors opened again, and in walked Naomi. Not in a uniform, not in shame, but in a tailored navy blazer, chin high, gaze steady. "Meet your new interim academic director," Malcolm announced. "She'll be overseeing a complete review of the school's equity and ethics policies." Richard stood frozen. Naomi didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was louder than any speech. A student once erased had returned, not to reclaim her seat, but to change the whole table. The office Naomi inherited still smelled like his cologne. Richard Whitman hadn't cleared out his things. He'd stormed out with a forced grin and an empty briefcase, leaving behind a drawer full of sealed files and a locked cabinet. She didn't touch them on day 1. She observed, listened, walked the halls. Teachers treated her cautiously, some with veiled resentment, others with surprising respect. Students whispered. A few sent emails of support. A sophomore girl approached her outside the library and asked quietly, "Will you bring back the inclusion program?" Naomi had paused. "What program?" "The one for students who can't afford lunch and uniforms," the girl replied. "My cousin applied last year, but didn't get in. She was told the budget was cut." Naomi nodded, but something about the tone, the shame in the girl's voice, unsettled her. That night, Naomi stayed late. She began combing through digital records, donation reports, fund allocations. The numbers didn't match. Millions in federal and private funds earmarked for minority and low-income student support were marked as received, but their application was vague, or worse, redirected. Redirected where? She cross-checked vendors. One in particular, Langford Consulting, kept appearing across unrelated expenses. But Langford didn't seem to exist. No website, no public address. Just a P.O. box in Midtown and a contact name, R. Whitman. Her stomach turned. She printed everything. She didn't confront anyone, not yet. Instead, she emailed Malcolm. I need a forensic accountant. Quietly. Within 24 hours, a former IRS auditor named Geneva Price sat beside her at a long mahogany table, scanning documents, lips pursed. This is laundering, she said. Classic shell routing. They pulled funds from earmarked grants and funneled them through fake consultants. Most likely paid themselves. How long? Naomi asked. Geneva flipped a folder. 5 years. Maybe more. Naomi leaned back. Her hands were cold. This wasn't just about her. It was about the kids whose applications were rejected. The ones who couldn't afford to stay. The ones told they didn't fit, when what they really didn't fit was a budget built on fraud. At the next faculty meeting, Naomi didn't wait. She stood in front of the same people who once watched her be humiliated and projected every document on the screen. For years, she said, voice calm, Oak Ridge has participated in a grant program meant to support underrepresented students. But instead of funding those students, the money was rerouted through a false consulting firm controlled by Richard Whitman. Gasps echoed. One teacher clutched her mouth. Another whispered, "Oh my God." Naomi continued. These actions denied real opportunities to real students. It wasn't just discrimination. It was theft. She stepped back. Geneva Price stepped forward. We've submitted the findings to federal authorities. An investigation is now open. And you, she pointed toward the stunned HR director, signed half of these authorizations. The woman turned pale. The room fractured, some shouting, others silent. But amid the chaos, Naomi stood still. She wasn't here to destroy. She was here to rebuild, and that always begins by burning away the lies. The fallout came faster than anyone expected. Within days, the Oak Ridge scandal had broken into local media. Headlines read, Elite Academy under federal investigation for misuse of inclusion funds. Naomi's name wasn't mentioned. Not yet, but internally, everyone knew who had triggered the unraveling. Some called her brave. Others called her dangerous. She walked the halls with quiet focus, acknowledging greetings but keeping her circle tight. Students looked at her differently now, some with admiration, some with fear. Parents began demanding meetings. One afternoon, a woman stormed into the administrative wing, shouting, "My son was denied a scholarship because someone stole the money? I want answers." Naomi met her in the conference room, handed her a copy of the report. "Your son deserved better," she said. "I can't undo what happened, but we're rebuilding from the ground up. You're welcome to be part of that process." The woman blinked, tears forming. No one's ever said that before. Word spread. Alumni came forward. One by one, former students who had been denied opportunities reached out, through emails, calls, even handwritten letters. Their stories painted a larger picture of a school built on exclusion masked as excellence. Meanwhile, Richard Whitman's world crumbled. Investigators showed up at his home. His assets were frozen. Rumors swirled that he was cooperating to avoid prison. He issued no statement. Naomi didn't want one. His silence was louder. Inside the school, tensions still simmered. A few teachers resigned quietly. Others requested transfers. Naomi didn't stop them. She welcomed new hires, young educators who believed in reform, not tradition. She also sat down with every department head and asked a single question: what does equity look like in your classroom? Some fumbled. Others answered with sincerity. Those who dodged the question didn't last long. Malcolm remained behind the scenes, rarely visiting the campus, but always available when needed. "You're doing what I never could," he told Naomi one evening on the phone. "You're changing it from the inside." "I don't feel like I'm changing anything," she replied. "Most days, I'm just cleaning up a mess I didn't make." "That is change," he said. the real kind. By the end of the term, a new admissions policy was drafted. Anonymous applications, needs-based scholarships, external auditing of all funding programs, transparency reports posted online. Naomi didn't just want compliance. She wanted culture shift. She visited classrooms, talked to janitors, ate lunch with students she used to sit beside as a peer. Some still looked at her like she didn't belong. Others smiled. And a few, the ones who felt seen for the first time, began to believe that maybe they did belong after all. In quiet moments, Naomi sometimes sat alone in her office, staring out at the quad. She thought of the girl who once walked through those doors trying to shrink herself to fit in. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone who no longer asked for permission to exist. Spring arrived slowly that year, brushing the Oak Ridge campus with soft colors and unfamiliar calm. The cherry trees bloomed in delicate defiance of the months before, as if nature itself had decided the school deserved a second chance. Naomi stood near the main gates, watching a group of younger students race across the lawn, their laughter breaking gently against the old stone walls. Change was no longer a theory, it was living in the rhythm of the school day. The federal investigation concluded quietly, but not without consequences. Richard Whitman accepted a plea deal, surrendered his credentials, and would never work in education again. The funds he misappropriated were traced, recovered in part, and redirected to the students they were meant for. Naomi never attended his sentencing. She didn't need to. Her justice had never been about punishment. It had always been about truth. Geneva Price remained on as an external auditor, respected and, in some departments, feared. Malcolm Carter, though still quiet in presence, accepted a permanent advisory seat on the newly formed school board. At his insistence, it was Naomi who voted on final decisions. And it was Naomi who, at the final assembly of the academic year, took the stage to deliver the closing speech. She wore no robe, no special sash. Just a navy blazer, crisp and calm. This year, she began, we were forced to confront who we were. And that gave us the chance to decide who we want to become. Oak Ridge was built on the idea of excellence, but excellence without fairness is just privilege. Going forward, this school will stand for something more. The applause was quiet at first. Then it grew. Not thunderous, but steady, earnest. That afternoon, she met with a new director, Dr. Camille Reeves, a fierce, brilliant woman Naomi had personally recruited from a community college system known for transformative work. Camille had been skeptical at first. They'll eat you alive, she'd said. Not if we change the menu, Naomi had replied. And they had. On her last official day as interim director, Naomi left the office clean. No scent of cologne, no locked drawers, just sunlight and a desk she didn't plan to return to. She was 16 after all. College was ahead. Dreams were calling. But the foundation had been laid. As she stepped through the gates one final time as staff, Naomi looked back, not with bitterness, but with pride. The school hadn't changed her. She had changed the school. And that, she knew now, was the real legacy. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Now tell me, where in the world are you hearing this story from?